Hello, you guys. Today we're here with Barbara Davis from Ontario, Canada. So first of all, Barbara, thank you so very much for being with us here today. It's such a pleasure. I'd like to know a little bit about your history and for our listeners, so that you understand a little bit better. We've met through Friendship Force International. It's an NGO that we both participate. So Barbara was here in Brazil. So tell us a little bit about your impressions here from Brazil, Barbara, and a little bit of your history in Canada, your background there, please.
Okay, thank you very much for inviting me to join you. It's a pleasure also. I loved Brazil and especially the Pantanal. I'm very much into nature, birds and animals, and they were just everywhere. And I am here in Costa Rica right now. We have been coming here for many winters since 1996. And I have had on my list to see a jaguar. I have gone everywhere in Costa Rica where I'm supposed to be able to see a jaguar, but have not had any luck. First day in the Pantanal, wow, a jaguar. I could not believe it. Day one. It was wonderful.
Wow, day one.
Yes, and my other very favorite place that we saw was the where we saw the big hole of the macaws.
Yeah.
I could have stayed there all day taking photographs. It was wonderful. And
this was in Bonito, right, Barbara?
Yes, yes.
Yeah,
yes.
It's a very famous site, isn't it? And there are hundreds of macaws, and they're singing, they're flying together. It's just beautiful, isn't it?
It was awesome in the true sense of the word, awesome. The people and the food in Brazil are wonderful. There are no complaints there. We were a little surprised that it was so cool in Sao Paulo when we went south. And it was even colder at Iguazu and rainy. We were not prepared for that, but it was my third time in Iguazu. First time for my husband, but I have done 2 medical missions in the Amazon. And after the medical missions, I went with my friends, my nursing colleagues to Iguazu.
That's so nice. But tell us a little bit about your history, please, your background. You're from Ontario. Tell me about a little bit about your career. And then we're gonna also talk a bit about your humanitarian missions, right? That's one of the motives that I invited you to join us as well.
Okay. My background is I graduated from nursing in 1996. And 1993, I did my first medical mission. And it was very hard for me. It was before we had internet and before I could have any communication with home when I was in Ecuador. And it was very difficult. We were doing trauma in an area where there were a lot of gold mines, international gold mines, and there was a lot of trauma. And when I got back to Miami and called my husband that I was home well, at least in North America, I heard his voice and burst out crying, and he said, "What's wrong?" And I said, "I don't know. There's hot water here." I didn't know what to say. And when he picked me up in Toronto, he said, "I guess you're not doing any more missions." I said, "Oh, yes, the need is so great." And he said, "What was all the crying about?" I said, "I don't know." It was actually reverse culture shock. So this
culture
is something.
Shock is very intense, right? I felt myself. Yeah, absolutely.
especially when we were working with trauma in an area where the little tiny hospital did not look after any patient until the owner of the mine would come and pay for care. And so we were looking after them. I couldn't believe it that they would allow a patient to just be there in pain and dirty and not do anything for them. I couldn't believe that. But anyway, that is often what we see in the third world, in the developing countries, where they don't have access to healthcare like we do at home.
Yeah, so you are a nurse, and then in the beginning of your career, you worked in the operating room as well, right?
Yes.
Did you work with some specific type of specialty, Barbara?
I worked in all the departments from cardiovascular, orthopedic, gynecology, everything. I did not want to specialize in one special group because I worked a lot of night shifts, and you have to be prepared for any kind of trauma or emergency that comes in at night, whether it's a ruptured aortic aneurysm or trauma from a car accident. You have to be prepared for everything.
And why did you choose this profession? I mean, I majored in physiotherapy myself, so I understand that the health area may be sometimes very stressful, hard. It brings a lot of psychological load on you. Just like you were saying, you were bursting in tears. Not only because of the cultural shock, but also for the situation, traumatic situation. You were seeing the patients, right? But tell us a little bit, why did you choose to be a nurse first place, and how was that you fell in love for these humanitarian missions as well?
Okay, nursing, first of all, you must understand that I've always, even as a child, liked animals and nature, and I wanted to be a veterinarian, actually. And my parents, in those days, a girl was either a nurse or a secretary or a teacher or a waitress or something like that. So my parents did not have the money to send me to university for veterinary. And they said, you're only going to get married and have a family and not work. So that was the thinking in those days. Yeah. Today a girl can be an astronaut or an engineer, whatever she chooses, right? Yep. So then I thought, well, then if I can't help animals, I'll help human beings. And I decided to be a nurse. And they said, finally, you are doing what a girl should be doing, right? Because I used to like to climb trees and bring home birds with broken wings and things like that. So that was kind of how it started. And I love people also. And one day, one of our anesthesiologists said to me, you would be a good one. And I said, good one for what? And he said, well, how about, have you ever thought of combining your medical knowledge and skills with work in the developing world? And I said, no. And he said, why don't you think about it? So he planted the seed, was an anesthesiologist. And that was when I did my first medical trip to Ecuador in 1993, and I got hooked. I love it. I love working.
Right?
I love working on medical teams like that because I can be with the people, I can touch them, I can put my arm around them, I can cry with them, I can laugh with them.
It's amazing. It's an amazing work. How many missions have you done so far, and for which institutions, please?
I've been on 44 third world missions.
It's amazing.
The majority are with Medical Ministry International, but I did quite a few with HeartLinks, which is involved in northern Peru, and it's not a medical NGO. Mm-hmm. It has to do with assertiveness for women and developing skills in young people, mm-hmm. in teenagers, and things like that. So that was also amazing. I was even a project leader there and an assistant project leader on those. A different kind of a mission, but it's still excellent. Yeah, I just enjoy doing it. My husband has come on 10 of them with me as a general helper.
Really?
He was a high school teacher in technology, but he comes as a general helper. He's helped by registering patients, or maybe by crowd control, or by repairing things. Like in Rwanda, he was given a key to a room and he repaired all kinds of equipment for us there, including taking maybe 3 broken wheelchairs and making 1 or 2 that worked, repairing medical scopes for the operating room, that kind of thing. So he also has a great role to play.
Yeah, I can tell. I was checking here because you've sent me the list of trips, right? The volunteer trips you've done. So you've been all over, but you've come quite often to Latin America, right? Ecuador, Guatemala, Haiti, Mexico, Peru, many times, Bolivia. So I'd like to ask you, what's something that you could say that here in Latin America we have in common in terms of health problems? And yeah, tell us a little bit about your connection with Latin America, most specifically with South America, because from the 44 that you've done, you've come here mostly, right?
Yes. I love especially Peru. I've been to Peru 17 times. I love the culture, the history, the food, the music. That's one reason why I learned Spanish. I do not need a translator. Sometimes I even they assign me to be a translator. So I've even learned the medical terminology that's required. Mm-hmm. I just love South America. I think that might be one of the reasons also why we like it here so much in Costa Rica. Mm-hmm. All our friends here are Tico, or Costa Rican people, and we socialize with them. They've been our friends. They're like our family. They've come to visit us in Ontario. We've been to 5 weddings here, even one this year in January. So, yes.
And related to the health situation, the medical situation here in South America.
Medical problems. Many of these countries do not have health care for people that are poor. Mm-hmm. They may have a vaccination program, but if they need surgery, they have to have the money for it, or they just don't get it. Mm-hmm. So we come and we do surgery. We do eye care, cataract surgery, all kinds of things like that. So
you do these very high, sophisticated procedures that these people wouldn't have otherwise at all, right?
Correct.
Wow, that's impressive. Congratulations, yeah, on this job. I was very impressed since the beginning. And when you came here specifically to Brazil, Barbara, what type of medical mission did you do here? You were there in the Amazon, am I right?
We were in the Amazon. We were on a medical boat. There, we flew into Manaus. Then we took a boat 30 hours up the Amazon into one of the tributaries where there were no roads, no airstrips. The people survived on the river. And we had a surgical team. We had a dentist with us. And we did surgery for people. I was very impressed because on the boat, they had medical records of all the people in the villages that we visited. So they knew who was diabetic, who needed insulin. They knew who had arthritis and needed medication for pain relief for arthritis. They did registration of new births, did vaccinations for children. It was very, very well organized. This group, they have 3 boats and they're sponsored by the World Presbyterian Church.
But basically you were giving service to the natives from the Amazon, the indigenous people, is that right?
Some of them were indigenous and some of them were Hispanic. It depended on the village we were in. Some of them lived in grass huts. Some of them lived in floating homes on the river. It was very interesting, the different cultures, yes.
Absolutely. And you were saying before that you needed to learn Spanish in order to communicate better in the first language, and of course it's much better this way, right? To break these barriers. And when was that exactly?
Okay,
was it a long time ago?
You do not need to learn Spanish or any language to be on these trips because we always have translators.
Sure.
But I wanted to be able to communicate with the people. So I came here to Costa Rica in 1993 to take a course in Spanish, and then we came back in 1996. I also went to a college close to home, to night school for adults for 5 semesters to learn Spanish. And my teachers were from different countries. I had a teacher from Chile who is a very good friend now, another one from Mexico, another one from Cuba, different teachers with different accents.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that.
Very different. Yes. And part of my learning process was in the mornings before going to work or sometime during the day because I did work shifts. My husband got me a subscription to Reader's Digest in Spanish. So I would get a Reader's Digest every month. And I would recommend anyone learning a language to get a simple book like that, not a big novel, that you could sit down with a coffee for 10 minutes or 15 minutes and just read a short story or a joke or something about sports or about adventure, because Reader's Digest has all of these little short stories in there. And that helped me a lot with vocabulary. So I would sit with my dictionary and look up words, but slowly I didn't need the dictionary anymore, right? And,
yeah, absolutely.
And then if you have access to watching TV or something like that, listening is very important. And that's what I'm doing with my Polish. I'm learning Polish now as well. And that's what I do is listen.
How do you listen to audiobooks? Do you listen to series from Poland in Polish, of course? Do you have a Polish friend? Because something that is very important is, of course, the practice of listening and speaking, right? Just like we are offering to our podcasters and listeners here.
Yeah.
So how are you doing with Polish? Because in Spanish you had the practice with all these teachers, but also in real life, because you were coming here down to these countries, right? But how is it with Polish?
With Polish, my husband got a special programs so that I can watch TV channels from Poland. And I try to do that at about an hour a week when I have time, usually on a Sunday. I also listen to podcasts.
Yeah, sure.
There's one that I like. It's called Real Polish, and the man that does it speaks very slowly, and he doesn't do grammar. He just talks about different things. And so I try to listen to that as often as I can. And I also talk on the phone, which is difficult, to my cousin in Poland.
Wow.
They're very kind and say that I'm speaking well, but I know I'm not yet.
You are on the path, right? You are on the process still. Yeah, and it's okay.
And I find when I'm learning a language, and it was the same in Spanish, I feel like I make progress, and then all of a sudden I'm on a level, and I feel I'm not getting anymore. I'm not making it. And then that I stay at that level for a little while, and then okay, I'm learning more now. And another thing that was really amazing was when I could understand the words in songs.
Yeah, that's so cool.
That was, wow. I knew what he was singing about. That was really something.
Yeah. And with songs, we can understand the culture of that country, right? That specific country, and that's so nice. But a question that came to my mind: why Polish specifically? Are you planning on moving to Poland?
No. In 2009, we went to Poland to find my father's roots, my father's family.
Oh, you've got some heritage there then.
Yes, and we had all the paperwork we needed, my father's birth certificate, death certificate, my birth certificate, my parents' marriage, everything. And we went to the village where my father was born. And the priest there couldn't help me very much because I knew my father had 6 sisters, but I didn't know their names. But he had a housekeeper that was about 89 years old, and he showed all this, the pictures I had brought of my cousins when they were younger and from the 1960s. And the housekeeper said, I know that man. I went to school with him. Wow. And I know where he lives. And we asked if we could borrow the housekeeper, and it was my cousin, my first cousin, Anthony. And at first he kind of, who is this person, right? And then he saw my father's picture, and then they invited us in, and they had letters from my father, pictures of myself when I was growing up. And so it's my family. I have cousins. I have lots of cousins in Poland. I grew up without a big family. I never knew grandparents. So this was awesome to find family.
Wow. And why did they end up in Montreal, right? Because you were born in Montreal.
Yes. My father, when he was 18, the war was starting, and he escaped Poland. He was he was 18 in the Polish Air Force, and the whole squadron escaped Poland, made their way to England through France, through Greece and France and everything. And then he flew during the war as a bomber pilot during the Second World War.
Wow.
He did 36 missions as a bomber pilot, and then he went into air transport. And with their transport, he also flew to Canada and met my mother. And after the war, there were about 70,000 young Polish men that fought against Hitler that could not go back to Poland. So they settled in Brazil, in
Everywhere,
South
right?
America,
Yeah.
in England, in United States, everywhere. And my father settled in Canada and could not go back to Poland because it was being occupied by the Russians. The Russians said they liberated Poland, but they actually occupied Poland.
Wow, yeah, we've got some Polish here down in the south. I don't know, have you been to Curitiba or to, well, Foz do Iguaçu is in the south, but the state is
Yes.
Paraná, right? But the
Yes.
Polish are like in the southern region, but more to the south, like more Santa Catarina, which is another state. I don't know if you've heard or if you have visited. Anyways, wow, it's been such a journey. I really loved this chat. Thank you so much. I really appreciate having met you, all these great stories of yours, all these brilliant missions. I really hope we can have more chats like that in the future, perhaps. You could tell us a little bit more about the missions in a more specific ways, more about the medical part of it that interests me a lot. But thank you so much. I think it's so very important that people from all over the world understand that learning English or learning Polish or learning a second language is not a piece of cake, but it can definitely be pleasurable if you combine that with trips, with something you like, with your work. And so thank you so very much for your time. I'm honored with your history, with everything that you've done as a humanitarian nurse. We are very privileged to have people like you, because coming from a first world country, many people just don't care, but see people like you who cares about the world out of their yards. It's very nice, and I'm really pleased for it. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome, and actually it is my privilege to be able to serve. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, and hope to see you soon here in Brazil. You're more than welcome. Come more times, okay?
Thank you, Tiago. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. See you. Have a great one. Bye-bye.